Hour number 3 here on draft day number 2. Dalton Kincaid in the Bills' pocket. Who's added tonight in rounds 2 and 3? We're going to dice that up with potential options with who else? The guy that spends more time watching film than you probably do breathing. It's the senior producer from NFL Films, Greg Cosell, joining us after helping us out last night and a little short on sleep, as we all are. Greg, how you doing? You all right?
I'm hanging in there, Brownie. Still got in early this morning watching some more guys. It's never ending.
That's right.
Early impressions about the first round. What grabbed you?
Overall?
Yeah, overall.
I would say for me, because, watching so many guys, I wouldn't say there were any real surprises for me. People say someone's a reach or you could have gotten someone later. I've never subscribed, Steve, to that theory because you never know those kinds of things. And I think in this year's draft, there are so many players who probably on teams' boards were bunched together. So it becomes what fills a need for you, at that time. I know a lot of people thought that the Bills linebacker, not the Bills linebacker, the Iowa linebacker, Jack Campbell, people said, oh, that's a reach. Well, the way I look at players like that is you know exactly what you're getting. He's going to be the same player every single day, and he's a good player. And you know what? You get enough of those guys on a team, Steve, as you know, and you have a pretty good team.
Yeah, that's right. What do you think about the Bills at 25, jumping up a couple spots?
I mean, obviously, they really wanted Kincaid, or they wouldn't have done that. You never know if Kincaid, of course, they're going to say Kincaid was their guy. You never know if maybe they wanted a wide receiver, and with the run on 4 consecutive wide receivers, they felt, hey, Kincaid's our next guy, and we want to make sure we get him. But I can tell you one thing. I watched Kincaid last summer from his 2021 tape, and of course, I watched him this year from his 2022 tape, and I really liked the player. And, one point I made last night with Brownie and Maddie, and Steve, I'll make it now with you, is he's not a tight end in the sense that you just put TE next to his name. He's a receiver and he's a weapon, and you can line him up anywhere. So it's, for people who necessarily think, oh, they drafted another tight end. He's not just a tight end in that sense.
Yeah, I was saying they should just start calling him a tight receiver. But yeah, I mean, Steve and I were talking about this, Greg, and Brandon Beane touched on this a little bit last night, and he said that he likes Kincaid's feel when he's out on a route. He doesn't just run what's written on the card. He reads the defense and adjusts accordingly. And Brandon Beane compared that kind of feel that he sees that Kincaid possesses with that of Cole Beasley. This is a guy in Kincaid who's going to line up in the slot an awful lot, as you probably anticipate. And I think one of the things that was missing from the offense last year were the easy button answers for Josh to beat the blitz. This guy would seem to be the type of player that could provide those easy answers to beat the blitz going forward. Would you agree?
Yes, and he's also very good run after catch. So a lot of times you can throw those 6, 7, 8-yard balls, and he can turn them into a 20-yard gain. One of the things that stood out, and I think you guys would agree last year with the Bills, the pass game in particular, as the season progressed, is sometimes it seemed like everything was hard. It seemed like they were trying to hit big plays. They weren't getting, the so-called layups that then you had some run after catch. And very often that's a function of many things, obviously not just one, but, you don't want to have to live all the time on explosive plays where the ball's thrown 25, 30 yards down the field. That's really hard in this league, no matter how good your quarterback is. So, you're looking for receivers that can get open, and when you get them the ball, they provide the run after catch. And I think Kincaid is that kind of player. And he's also a seam stretcher. He does give you a vertical element. So it'll be very interesting. And we touched on this, Brownie, last night. Yeah. You don't draft Kincaid unless you're thinking more now in terms of 12 personnel. Now, Kincaid is ultimately a receiver and a weapon as opposed to a true tight end, but he's still, just based on size, a tight end. So you would have to believe they'll play more 12 personnel.
Right, and I was making the point that even if they're not going to play it most of the game, they certainly got to sprinkle it in early in the game to find out how a defense will how they'll match up. You know, what defensive personnel will the defense respond with when you put them on the field, right?
And the great thing about Kincaid, Stephen, you're 100% right, is Knox can do it to some degree. Kincaid can do it more, is that he can be detached from the formation. I remember a couple of years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, time flies, talking to a coach about lining up tight ends as your boundary X, the single receiver to the short side of the field on the back side of trips. In other words, 3 wide receivers to the wide side. And one of the things he said to me, and I've incorporated that in a lot of my tape study and just the way I see the game, is he said that gives the quarterback so much pre-snap information because of how the defense lines up to that. That's one reason why the Chiefs are so good. Kelsey is the master. They do that more than any team in the league. They line up Kelsey as the boundary X. Kincaid is capable of being that guy because he can run routes like that, and that really helps your quarterback before the snap of the ball because the defense has to react in certain ways.
All right, so Greg, let's spin this forward now because Kincaid is on the roster. He was made the first-round draft choice of the Bills. There were a lot of Bills fans that thought that the Bills in their passing game needed help in the slot. Kincaid kind of is that already. So how much do you think this reduces the likelihood of the Bills taking a receiver anywhere else in this draft?
I think it reduces it a meaningful amount because I think the other factor is I think that Shakir has a chance to be a pretty good player. Now, again, I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to catch 80 balls for 1,000 yards, but I think toward the end of the season, he showed that he could perform as a slot receiver. And I think with the combination of Kincaid, who's more than capable of filling that role, and Shakir, I don't think that look, you never know. As you know, Brownie, we never know till they make the picks. But I don't think that becomes a big-time priority right now.
All right, so in spinning this forward, we've got a little list here that we're going to go through maybe, and we've talked a little bit about these guys. We've got 3 linebackers, 3 defensive tackles, and of course a wide receiver just in case. And so let's start with that. Let's start with the wide receiver, Jonathan Mingo, Ole Miss.
That's his favorite.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, the guy's got some skills. Tell us about him.
Oh my God, I love Jonathan Mingo. I watched his tape very early in the process. And I said to one of my guys on the matchup show, because I watched him, it might have been either before the Super Bowl or right after the Super Bowl when I came back. And I said, this guy is, when all's said and done, this guy is going to be a second-round pick or maybe a late first-round pick. And I think that'll happen tonight. He'll be a second-round pick. He is big. He's physical. He ran really well. His athletic testing measurables were really, really good. He's smooth. He's got strong hands. He's competitive run after catch. He has vertical ability. I kind of thought that just stylistically, he kind of reminded me of A.J. Brown. And they both are from Ole Miss. And keep in mind that A.J. Brown, until his last 6 or 7 games at Ole Miss, was almost exclusively a slot receiver. And then in his last 6, 7 games, played on the outside. And we know what he's become in the league. But I think Jonathan Mingo has similar traits, and we're talking about 6'2", 220. And he's a big man and a physical, competitive player.
All right, we don't know if he's on the board when the Bills pick at 59, but, we've heard this name before. We've talked about him before. Drew Sanders, the Alabama transfer to Arkansas, is still on the board right now. Jack Campbell went, I think, a lot earlier than people anticipated. But he's the only linebacker off the board so far. So yeah. What about Sanders? And you think he goes top half of the round?
I mean, he's, to me, Trenton Simpson, I assume will go because of the athletic traits. But Sanders is 6'4 plus, 235. He predominantly was a stacked linebacker at Arkansas, even though when he left Alabama, he was really an edge player, but he was a stacked linebacker at Arkansas. I thought he played well, given that the position was relatively new to him. I thought that he had a good feel for what he saw for key and diagnose. I thought, normally you think that's going to be a problem when someone's new to that position, but he has great play speed. He has pursuit range. He ran down backs. He ran down quarterbacks. He does have pass rush ability. That's the other added dimension. You can line him up off the edge. He can rush the quarterback from inside as well. So he gives you an added dimension as a stacked backer. You don't necessarily look this team, assuming they stay with what they've done. Obviously, they don't have Edmonds anymore, but this team did not play dime. They played nickel, so they kept their 2 linebackers on the field. We know Milano is not coming off the field, so someone like Sanders, if he was ready to play as a rookie, he fits that bill. I can't speak, Brownie, to where, whether he'll be there at 59. Those people a lot smarter than I am figure out who's, the order of tonight's drafting.
Give us a little insight into Diane Henley, the Washington State linebacker.
Oh, yeah, that guy's fun. That guy is really, really fun to watch. Now, you're dealing, Steve, with a guy that was a receiver. He went to Nevada as a receiver. He's only played stack backer for 2 years. And this guy is a compact, sudden, supercharged, competitive athlete. He's got great play speed. He's got great range. His activity and energy level on every snap is exactly what you want. He's got a quick trigger in the run game. Another guy, not a lot of experience playing stack, but you didn't think watching his tape, he's not really seeing things. I mean, he was quick. When he saw it, he went. He's a scrape and flow, run and chase guy. I thought he played with really good vision. He was one of my favorite guys to watch, just the way in which he played the game.
Yeah. The only unfortunate thing is he's a little short on the measurables, quite literally. He's a short guy and he's a light guy.
Yeah, he's 6'1", 225. The height's okay. The 225, some people might say that doesn't work, particularly with Milano. You may not want 2 guys that are light.
Yeah. The last linebacker, a little bit of a day 2 sleeper, Marte Mapu from Sacramento State. He played some safety too, though, right? He's got kind of like a hybrid. He's a hybrid, Greg?
Yeah, he's a fascinating guy because, I think he will, to me, he would project best as a linebacker. But the guy made a ton of plays with range. He's a very rangy player. He's a tall athlete. He's over 6'2". I think he weighs about 220. So another guy that, again, a lot of these young kids can gain weight. So, you don't know if that can happen, but he's about 220 now. I think I think his skill set ultimately works as a stacked linebacker. He played a lot of nickel corner. I don't believe he's a nickel corner in the NFL by any stretch of the imagination. And yes, he did play some safety as well. Maybe that's his position, but he's not a slot corner.
All right, let's move down and talk about some of the defensive tackles. The Bills have got 4 defensive tackles, all in the last year or in the last year of their contract or the only year of their contract, whichever the case may be. This has been one of the things that people have thought maybe the Bills get some long-term stability at the position in this draft. Let's start with Keanu Benton out of Wisconsin.
Yeah, he's a really good prospect. He's another guy that was kind of fun to watch because first of all, he's got really good size. He's about 6'4", he's about 310, really good arm length. I thought he was one of the better interior D-tackle prospects in this draft. He's got size, length, power, movement, overall athleticism. When he stayed low, and this was just something he has to work on, when he stayed low and played with really good leverage, boy, he was a force inside, both as a run defender and with his ability to rush the quarterback. Now, he's not a big-time pass rusher. You're not thinking about him the way you think of those great interior pass rushers, but I thought he was a good prospect. The main issue with him is there were just too many snaps in which he was a little slow out of his stance and rose up. I think that's fixable. It's going to need to be fixed because that negates his quickness and his power. And, obviously that makes him not as good a player. But when he really stayed low, Steve, he was a dynamic interior D lineman.
All right, let's move along. And we go to, I believe it's pronounced Gervon Dexter out of Florida. Big kid. What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, one of the most frustrating guys to watch because this guy has tremendous ability. There were times watching his tape where you came away thinking this guy's Chris Jones. And he made those kinds of plays, but it just didn't happen often enough. He was late off the ball too often. He played too high. Both of those things would prevent him from being a consistent quality tackle. They must be cleaned up. But when you see the good plays, you go, oh my God, this guy could be great. And for whatever it's worth, other than to indicate that he's a really good athlete, at 6'6", 310, he ran a 4.88 40, which is pretty remarkable. So it's all there on tape. It's in his body. He just needs to do it, and he probably needs some hard coaching. But when you're laid off the ball and when you stand up, as you know, Steve, you can't play in this league.
Yeah, you're right. It's that's an albatross around your neck if you stand up. Give me one last guy here. Let's talk about Zach Pickens, South Carolina.
Yeah, Zach Pickens he was a big time recruit at South Carolina. That was a coup for them when they got him. And he's actually a guy I liked quite a bit. I thought he has the traits that are needed to play both in a two-gap system and in a one-gap scheme, and I think that gives him the opportunity to transition effectively. He weighs about 290, so he's not over 300, but he's 6'4", tremendous arm length. Again, great athletic testing measurables for a guy that big. He showed penetrating quickness. He showed the ability to two-gap with strength and power and to control and displace interior O-linemen. There's a lot to like about this guy. I think early in his career, he would be a base defense D-tackle and not play in your sub-fronts. He needs to become a lot more refined and better as a pass rusher, but I think that can happen 2-3 years down the road.
Yeah, he's got 34.5-inch arms and 10 3/8-inch hands. I mean, when he gets his hands on you, it's over.
Yeah, he was a fun guy to watch.
All right, Greg. So I don't know. I look at this first round, and it's 7 edge guys off the board, 4 corners, 4 defensive tackles, 4 wide receivers, 4 offensive tackles, and then just 3 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, a tight end, a linebacker, and a guard.
Yeah, but what does that tell you, Brownie? That tells you that essentially what teams draft for now is the passing game in the NFL. It's the passing game on offense and stopping the passing game on defense. Because even though 2 backs were taken, and obviously people say you don't take backs, both backs have major film in which they're detached from the formation, run routes that look like wide receivers. So it's basically a passing game league now, and pretty much everything is based on that. So once you get beyond quarterbacks, everything relates to the quarterback and the passing game.
Yeah, you can look at position groups will tell you. The linebackers now, none of them, you have 2 guys in this class that are over 240, at middle linebacker. And everybody else is like 225 that can run, like, these athletes that are hybrid.
Cover,
they're hybrid safeties, basically playing down inside. Do you think there's going to be a time when the pendulum will swing back and you get a team like Baltimore that runs the football right at you and you got to kind of throw some weight on the field to defend it?
I don't know if it'll swing back in the way you mean it, Steve, with the traditional run game.
Right.
I think it swings back with the quarterback being a factor in the run game. I mean, look what happened in Philly with Hurts. Look what's going to happen in Indy now with Richardson. They're essentially going to run the Philly offense with Shane Steichen there. I think the quarterback as a deciding factor and meaningful factor in the run game, even if he doesn't carry it 12, 13 times, but defensively, you have to defend that. And that causes some issues for you because, when the quarterback can potentially run, you've got to deal with that on the defensive side of the ball. So I think the run game could become more of a factor for that reason, but not old school where you line up and just hand it, the Derrick Henry approach, so to speak. I'm not sure that we're going to be going back to that.
Right.
Greg, thanks as always. We appreciate all your help, especially in dicing these guys up that you've watched a lot more of than we have. So thanks very much for all of it.
Well, appreciate it, guys. Talk to you next week.
Thanks,
Greg. All right.